Rudy Gobert is maybe the most polarizing player in the history of basketball. His box score will say he's one of the best defenders in the league. His advanced metrics will say he's one of the best defenders of all time. And a sector of the general NBA public will say he's not even the best big man on his own team. The discrepancy between the ways we analyze value in basketball seems to be at its greatest when we are talking about the Stifle Tower. And this left me with a pretty big question. If we can't agree on whether the 4-time Defensive Player of the Year is good, then who actually is a good rim protector? For those of you that don't know, the rim protector role is debatably the most important defensive role in basketball. That's because they are the last line of defense, the security blanket. Their job is to prevent the easiest shot in basketball, a shot at the rim. Because of their importance, many have tried, like I am now, to define what exactly makes a good rim protector good. A lot of people settle on blocks per game, which makes sense because when someone catches a floater out of the air or swats an ill-advised layup attempt into the stands, we can literally see a player imposing their will to protect the rim. For most, I would say 2 blocks per game is the line of delineation between a good rim protector and an average one, and that does make some logical sense until you get to Agent Block, Count Blockula himself, Mr. Hassan Whiteside. From 2014 to 2018, Hassan Whiteside made a name for himself as, with all due respect to Rudy Gobert and Anthony Davis, the most electrifying shot blocker in the league. I mean, do yourself a favor and go look at the man's highlight tape if you got 5 to 10 spare minutes. Some of his blocks look like you put Reed Richards on the basketball court in a Miami Heat uniform. Surely Mr. Blocktastic, someone who averaged the most blocks in any season of the last 20 years. Surely he's at least a pretty good rim protector, right? Wrong. Don't take my word for it. Just look at how the league treated him. Year after he leads the league in blocks, he has debatably a better season, and to repay him, the Heat draft his replacement in the lottery. 2 years later, he's top 10 in the league in blocks while only playing 23 minutes per game, and the Heat trade him to the Portland Trailblazers. On the Blazers, he has debatably the best statistical year of his career, 15.5 points per game, 13.5 rebounds, and again leads the league in blocks. The Blazers repay him by not re-signing him. 2 years later, Whiteside is on the Kings, is again top 10 in blocks per game, except now he's only doing it in 18 minutes. He is on a minimum, so it will cost the Kings almost nothing to re-sign him, and instead they don't, and no one else does, and he hasn't played a game of NBA basketball since. If a high blocks per game average is the mark of a good rim protector, then why did the NBA treat one of, if not the best shot blocker of this century, like a below average role player? That's because the block itself matters less than how you go about getting this block. To properly illustrate this, let's go over the only defensive stat that I think is worth its salt: on-off defensive rating. On-off defensive rating as a defensive stat is, in my opinion, one of only like 2 or 3 defensive stats that DPOY voters should let influence their vote. And that is because it doesn't try to define what a good defender is. It doesn't say, oh, a good defender averages this many blocks, this many steals, and this many defensive rebounds. It only looks at the effects of you being in the game. The other team scores this much when you are in the game and this much when you are out. Extrapolate both of those over 100 possessions, and the difference is literally how much better you make your team's defense by being on the court. Not a perfect stat, but like all good stats, when paired with a little bit of eye test, it's pretty powerful. So what I did for this video is compiled a list of all the players over the last decade who averaged at least 2 blocks per game and ranked them from lowest to highest based on-off defensive rating. And what we can see from this list is, despite being one of the best shot blockers ever, Hassan Whiteside is indeed one of the worst alleged rim protectors of the last decade. Of the 52 player seasons in which a player averaged over 2 blocks per game over the last 10 years, Hassan Whiteside has the 2nd, 4th, and 9th least impactful seasons. That 9th season being the aforementioned 3.7 blocks per game performance. That makes sense. The reason why Hassan Whiteside was blackballed from the NBA was because the only thing he was actually good at, rim protection, he wasn't actually that good at. He was pretty bad actually, according to the numbers, and even worse according to the tape. 1 minute of watching Hassan Whiteside's tape and you can easily see why teams didn't like him. As a pick and roll defender, he was horrible in drop coverage. He was not concerned with guarding the roll man at all. He just wanted to try to swat the guard's shot attempt. Does this strat result in a lot of blocks? Of course it does. Look at his career. But if you happen to run up on a competent guard, which most of the NBA has, yeah, you're gonna get some blocks, but that guard is probably gonna get his roll man an obscene number of easy layups. But this isn't a Hassan Whiteside hate video. Brother did what he had to do to get his bread, and he certainly did that, so more power to him. This video is about, is Rudy Gobert a good rim protector or not? And because of that, I got a small confession to make. Just an itty bitty one. Actually, it's probably better I show you. Yep. 5 of the 10 best rim protector seasons of the last decade are Rudy Gobert seasons. Go figure, the brother's pretty good. If we look a little more closely, we can see those seasons all came when Rudy was on the Utah Jazz, and yeah, that matches up with the tape. When Rudy Gobert was on the Utah Jazz, the Jazz's entire defensive scheme was, Rudy back there somewhere. That's not an exaggeration. Jazz defenders' whole goal was to funnel cutters and ball handlers into the paint for Gobert to clean them up, and that he did to a remarkable degree. In his best season in Utah, Rudy Gobert's presence made the Utah Jazz 12.7 points better defensively. That was literally a bigger difference than the difference between the best and worst team defenses in the league that year. So yeah, Rudy Gobert is pretty darn good other than his press conference snafu, so why is he such a controversial player? Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, is a tale as old as time. Rudy Gobert sucks in the playoffs, so much so that it's quite remarkable, actually. Using that same on-off defensive rating stat, we can see that Rudy Gobert's defensive impact takes a huge dip in the playoffs. He goes from making his team 6 points better to 1.5 points worse. Most years it doesn't even come close, and that is a huge difference, especially when you take into account Rudy is a net negative on offense. And I think that right there hammers home exactly what I think is the answer to the question we asked at the beginning of the video. What makes a good rim protector good? It does not matter. It really doesn't. If it did, we wouldn't be having this 4-year-long referendum on Rudy Gobert's career, because he is a good rim protector, one of the best ever. The question we should be asking is a much broader one. How can a big man be a good defender? And the answer to that is one word that I talk about constantly on this channel: versatility. Rudy Gobert's issue to me has never been that his rim protection is fake or isn't as good as the numbers suggest. To me, his issue is that his rim protection is so good that coaches, front offices, and fans think they can use him in every scenario when you can't really. At least you can't in the postseason when teams are game planning for him, because as good as he is at defending the paint, there are so many ways to exploit him. Thus, if you are building your team defense around Gobert and not using him to build a team defense, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you are in turn making your defense easy to exploit. This, in my opinion, is why Rudy Gobert's impact is so insane in the regular season and so negligible in the playoffs. In the regular season, there isn't any game planning going on. Brothers just rolling the ball out there and hooping. In that circumstance, there aren't a lot of players who are more valuable than someone who can shut down the paint the way Rudy can, because it can so easily muck up and take advantage of teams without detailed offensive sets. In the playoffs, though, when teams are game planning for you every day for 7, 8, 9, 10 days, teams are going to figure out how to take away your fastball, and you have to have an off-speed pitch to counter them with. Rudy's fastball is elite rim protection, but when teams game plan on how to pull him away from the rim, what's his curveball? How does he put his fingerprints on the game when his greatest strength is taken away? He doesn't. Let's look at last year's playoffs, for instance. The Phoenix Suns, starting Yusuf Nurkic with Jock Landale backing him up, a team that did not run a lot of pick and roll. This is the perfect team to start Rudy Gobert against, because he can stay in the paint and do what he does best. He doesn't have to worry about Yusuf or Jock spreading the floor. He doesn't have to worry about getting attacked in the post, and he's not going to be put in a lot of pick and roll dilemma. All he has to do is stay in the paint and muck up the game for the Suns playmakers. Thus, he has a good series, and the Timberwolves as a whole sweep the Suns. The next series they play against the Denver Nuggets is, in my opinion, the perfect illustration of what my argument is. The games in which the Wolves coaching staff asked Gobert to do something he's unable to do, guard Jokic, he struggled. This issue was present in the Wolves-Nuggets series from the previous year as well, a series in which Rudy was asked to match up against Jokic for all 5 games, and he subsequently had the worst series of his career. If you have the heavier but quicker cat guard Jokic though, and put Rudy on a non-shooter like Aaron Gordon, so he can again do what he does best and roam the lane, he, and by proxy the team, thrives. The Timberwolves win a game without Rudy Gobert playing and are able to pull out the series once they get that defensive scheme right. But then you go up against a team without a lot of non-shooters, a team that's gonna consistently and constantly pull your big man out of the paint with pick and rolls and will kill drop coverage with pull-up jumper after pull-up jumper, then Rudy is fresh out of luck. I 100% believe if the Timberwolves give Naz Reid starter minutes instead of Rudy Gobert in last year's Western Conference Finals, then Minnesota at least forces a Game 7 against the Dallas Mavericks. Instead, they stick with Rudy and we get one of the most racially motivated images in the history of basketball. Okay, long story short, here's the synthesis of my overall argument this entire video. Is Rudy Gobert a bad defender? No, I just think he is constantly made into something he's not. He's not this new age defensive anchor like an Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, or what Wemby and Chet seem to be becoming. Players that can have all-world impact in every defensive scheme. No, he's just a rim protector. A very good one, don't get me wrong, but if you're asking him to do more than that, you're doing him and your team a disservice. He is not a Swiss Army knife. He's a scalpel. The perfect tool when used properly, but ineffective when used in other scenarios. I guess what I'm saying is, in my opinion, Rudy isn't a defensive star. Instead, he's just a really good defensive role player and should be treated as such. So to answer the question posed in this video, a good rim protector is someone who can protect the rim. A big man who is a good defender, though, is someone who is not just a good rim protector, but also good in every other defensive role in basketball. And the onus is upon a team's coaching staff and front office to tell the difference between the two. With that, thank you for watching the video all the way through. If you enjoy this content, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Comment down below what you think about my arguments, if you love it, if you hate it, what you agreed with or strongly disagreed with. Share the video with a friend, and as always, stay sweaty, ladies and gentlemen. Peace.